Watch Dogs 2 is in many ways a better game than the original Watch Dogs. The graphics are beautiful, the world feels more alive, and some aspects of the gameplay have been improved. But if I had to pick one word to describe my thoughts on the game as a whole, it would be boring. So goddamn boring. I literally had to force myself to finish the game for this video, as I seriously considered not completing it, because I was bored out of my mind. I did end up finishing it, but the first thing I did after beating the game was to uninstall it. I am never going to play this game again. But I don't want you to think that this is a terrible game, because it isn't. But if that's the case, why do I dislike this game more than the first one? Let's get into that. I played Watch Dogs 2 on the Xbox One. There will be spoilers for the whole game in this video. You have been warned. Watch Dogs 2 takes place in San Francisco and trades the rainy gloominess of Chicago for the sunny beaches of California, and the game looks absolutely gorgeous. Every square inch of the world seems to have been lovingly crafted by an incredible team of designers and artists. There's a ton of different unique buildings and locations within the city to explore. It comes as no surprise to anyone that a Ubisoft game has amazing animations in it, and since the parkour system has been overhauled and expanded on, seeing all the ways that Marcus navigates around the world is a treat. NPCs go about their daily lives and do a pretty good job at creating a convincing world. The draw distance is pretty impressive, even though there is some pop-in and load-in when driving around the city. The frame rate was very stable throughout most of my playthrough, only having stability issues a couple times. Visually speaking, the game's world is a very impressive accomplishment. The voice acting in the game is solid. Everyone did a good job with what they were given, even though what they were given wasn't necessarily that great. The sound design is very well done, creating a convincing sonic landscape that makes the city sound authentic. The soundtrack is not really something I would listen to outside of playing the game, as it's very electronic and that's not really my thing. I would say that it's not as memorable to me as the first game's soundtrack, but it's definitely not bad. Honestly, I don't have much to say here. The presentation is extremely solid overall and is definitely the best part of the game, but there's only so many ways to say that the game looks great. So instead of repeating myself, let's just move on to the next part of the video, the story. The CTOS software from the first game has found its way to San Francisco. The next version of the software, CTOS 2.0, has algorithms that can be used to determine probable suspects for committed crimes based on statistics and background information. Marcus Holloway, the new protagonist for Watch Dogs 2, is one such suspect. Only he didn't actually commit any crime. After being sentenced for a crime he didn't commit, Marcus wants to join the San Francisco branch of DedSec in order to try and take down Bloom. So Marcus goes through an initiation test and gets admitted into DedSec, and they begin trying to dismantle Bloom's hold on San Francisco. This sounds like a promising setup, but I gotta be honest, it really doesn't amount to much. The story of Watch Dogs 2 is absolutely the weakest link in my opinion. I'm not even sure where to start, to be honest. I guess we'll start with the characters, as the game tries very hard to make you care about your DedSec crew, but I never did. There's just no depth to any of these characters. The game makes a good first impression, as I was initially enjoying interacting with them in the hackerspace, which is your HQ in the game. But as I continued playing and the hours went by, I began to realize that I still didn't care about any of them any more than I had when I began playing. They're all so shallow and one note. Josh is autistic. That's it. That's his entire character. He has autism, which means he's awkward and doesn't get social cues. Haha, funny, let's laugh at the autistic kid. Wrench is the wacky, crazy character, emoji. Sitara is artsy and the girl. Horatio is the other black one and the one who dies. And Marcus is, I'm not sure. Marcus is kind of a blank slate. Like, he's mostly upbeat, but he kind of gives off this sort of I'm hip, young, and cool vibe, only he feels like he was written by someone who's much older and doesn't actually understand what being hip, young, and cool means. T-Bone shows up a few hours into the game, and I was genuinely happy to see him, as he was my favorite character from the first game, but he's as bland as all the other characters in this game. I think the big issue is that none of these characters really have any arcs or change at all during the course of the game. They all basically end up at the same place that they started in. The only character that they even try to add more depth to is Wrench, but it completely fails. Wrench always wears this fucking mask for the entire game, except for one mission where the FBI interrogate him and take his mask. Then Marcus goes and gets his mask back, and we get a cutscene where we see his face for the first time. He's got some sort of disfigurement on his face, and that's it. He doesn't explain why his face looks like that or why he wears the mask. We don't get any backstory or history to his character. We get nothing. This was the point where I truly gave up on the game's story and said, fuck it, I just want to finish this goddamn game. So I mentioned earlier that Horatio was the one who dies, and I seriously mean that that was all there was to his character. He gets introduced with all the other characters, he's there from the beginning of the game. But as I was playing through the game, I noticed that he basically had zero to do in the story. Like, he didn't take part in any missions, and he didn't really appear in any cutscenes. And I remember thinking, why the fuck is he even in this game? Then I got to the one and only mission that involves Horatio, and I was like, okay, I guess we're getting more of his character now, finally. And then he dies in literally the next mission. It was like something out of an anime when a side character only gets a backstory in the episode that they're killed. I call this Bleach syndrome. And the weirdest part is that his death wasn't even connected to the main story. He was kidnapped, tortured, and killed by some random gang that had nothing to do with the overall plot of the game. During my research for this video, I came across a 20-minute making of video by Ubisoft, which admittedly wasn't that informative, but there was something that stuck out to me. There were interviews with the actors for every member of your crew in the game except for Horatio. In fact, Horatio isn't mentioned once in the entire video, even though every other character is. So what I'm thinking is that Ubisoft decided late in development that they wanted to add some drama to the story with one of your crew being killed, but they didn't actually want to kill any of the characters they already had. So they wrote Horatio and put him in the game. I don't actually know if this is what happened, but it's my best guess, as you can take Horatio out of the game entirely and literally nothing would change. Actually, I do think Ubisoft should have left Horatio out, because his death really doesn't mesh well with the tone for the rest of the game, which is the next problem with the story, its tone. The first Watch Dogs was a very dark, gritty, and violent game. It really wanted you to take it seriously, and for the most part it worked, aside from a few side missions that didn't fit the tone. Watch Dogs 2 is the complete opposite. It's trying to be a lighter, funner game that doesn't want you to take it seriously, until it does want you to take it seriously. Like when Horatio gets tortured and killed, which was such a juxtaposition from the rest of the game that I started laughing during the cutscene. See, the thing about Watch Dogs 2 is that it doesn't have the same kind of teeth that a Grand Theft Auto game has. GTA games are parodies and satires of American culture, and they have no qualms about satirizing and parodying everything about America, and doing it in a vulgar, vile, and completely over-the-top way. Watch Dogs 2 is not a satire or a parody of anything. Its story revolves around very topical and relevant themes of surveillance, controlling information, privacy, and a bunch of other things, but the game plays it straight. And because it plays it straight, the more lighthearted and fun aspects of the game just don't combine well with the very serious matters the game wants to discuss. It also doesn't help that the story and gameplay are completely at odds with each other. I watched a video by a YouTuber called Long-Eared Fox that he did on Watch Dogs 2. I'll link it in the description in case you want to watch it yourself. The video is called "I Think That Watch Dogs 2 is Terrible." I personally wouldn't say that the game is terrible, even though I have a fair amount of issues with it and agree with most of his points. Anyways, in the video he says that he has issues with what he calls the forced positivity of all the characters. I completely understand what he's talking about, although I wouldn't call it forced positivity. I would say that the story, and by extension the characters, doesn't understand what kind of game Watch Dogs 2 is. Watch Dogs 2 is an open world sandbox style game where the player can do anything you could do in the first game. Only the first game's tone was way darker and fit the gameplay much better than the tone of Watch Dogs 2. You can kill FBI agents, police officers, and innocent people during the game's missions, but in the cutscenes all the characters are joking around and having a jolly good time, acting as if they didn't just commit domestic terrorism. This was so fucking jarring to me. Let me break out a fancy game review word here. Ludonarrative dissonance is very fucking real with Watch Dogs 2. I mean, even IGN talked about it in their review of the game. If fucking IGN noticed it, you done fucked up. The last thing I'll say about the story is that it's not written well. I mean, you probably gathered that, but I'm specifically talking about the dialogue and the quote-unquote humor. The dialogue for all the characters feels like this.
How do you do, fellow kids?
I'm 24 years old, so around the same age as the characters in the game. I don't talk the way they talk. None of my friends talk the way they talk. In fact, no person I've ever met around my age talks the way these characters talk. Granted, I don't live in San Francisco and I'm not even American, but the dialogue reeks of older writers trying to write younger characters, but not quite grasping how the current generation actually communicates. And the humor is just... okay, I would say this part of the game is terrible. The humor is so memey and internety and cringe, like, fuck. Again, it feels like it was written by someone who thinks they understand what internet humor is, but really doesn't. Watch Dogs 2 plays very similarly to the first game. There's still the parkour, stealth, and combat triangle. The parkour has been expanded on from the first game, where Aiden could only climb and run certain places, and most of the city wasn't explorable in that way. Watch Dogs 2 is much more like Assassin's Creed, where if you see it, you can probably climb it, or jump it, or run it. The game also incorporates hacking in its free running. You can hack into and control various kinds of heavy machinery like lifts to help you get to the tops of buildings, and in some cases you can even use full-on cranes, which is pretty sick. The bigger emphasis on exploring is furthered with the introduction of discoverable research points and key data, which can be found in the game world. Research points function as your currency to upgrade Marcus, improving things like his shooting or unlocking new hacking abilities. You do get research points from missions as well, but you only get key data from exploring. Certain upgrades cannot be unlocked without finding their specific key data in the game world. Personally, I would have much preferred having a generic key data system that could be used to unlock any upgrade that needed key data instead of having to go and find the specific one I needed for the upgrade I wanted. The hacking has been improved from the first game. There's much more you can do in game and much more interactivity with your environments. One of my favorite things to do is hack cars to get them to swerve off the road or reverse while going at full speed. It's very satisfying to pull off during a car chase. Marcus has access to two small vehicle gadgets to help him out with hacking and stealth: the RC jumper and the quadcopter. The quadcopter is like a mini UAV that can be used to scan areas and help with puzzles. The RC jumper was actually first seen in the Bad Blood DLC from the first game and can be used to lure enemies and hack into their systems from afar. Another part of Watch Dogs 2 that was originally introduced in Bad Blood are the in-world puzzles. They're still the same pipe puzzles, only they're all in the game world this time around and require you to move around to be able to solve them. I usually use the quadcopter for these, and I gotta tell you, just this one design change really improved the puzzles for me. I mean, they're still not amazing puzzles, but they're better than the first game. Watch Dogs 2 has a sizable amount of side missions and side content to do, but all of it more or less boils down to go here and hack this, or go here and press a button to do an action. I found the side missions in this game to be even less compelling than the ones in the first game, and barely did any of them. I did happen to do the Aiden Pierce cameo side mission, where Aiden gets captured by a gang and Marcus frees him, but you don't get any interaction with Aiden. You just watch him escape from his cell, and he's gone. He doesn't even have a single line of dialogue. That's pretty lame. A lot of people hated the driving in the first game, and Watch Dogs 2 definitely improves on it. It's still not that great, but it is easier to control the cars. However, I would actually say that I enjoyed driving in the first game more than the second, for one crucial reason: the slow-mo mechanic. The first game had a slow-mo mechanic where you could slow down time while driving or shooting in order to make tight turns at Mach speed or get easier headshots. But that mechanic is absent in Watch Dogs 2, and I think the game is lesser for it. See, the shooting in Watch Dogs 1 wasn't anything that special, to be honest, but it was aided by the slow-mo mechanic, making shootouts feel a lot cooler. You could string together headshots and melee takedowns in a way that made you feel almost like John Wick, just taking down guys left and right. Watch Dogs 2 has the same functional yet unremarkable shooting mechanics from the first game, only without the secret sauce of the slow-mo. This made the shootouts in the game feel really boring and tedious to me. Stealth is a big component to the game, and it's definitely more challenging than the first game. You do have more options available to you to stealthily make your way into enemy locations than you previously had, but there's also more obstacles to overcome as well. Many of these obstacles can be bypassed by upgrading your hacking, however, so once you do that, the challenge significantly lessens. Marcus also has a new taser gun which will quietly knock out enemies, though it still does make noise, just not as much as a regular gun would, so it still alerts enemies if they're close by. The best part of the first game's gameplay returns in Watch Dogs 2, which is the open-ended mission design design. Almost every mission in the game allows you to decide whether you want to go in guns blazing, or go in stealthily, taking down guards silently, or even get by just by hacking and not even setting foot in the mission area. This is by far the most impressive part of the gameplay. But all in all, I don't find the gameplay of Watch Dogs 2 to be very compelling. It all works, it's functional, but I wouldn't call any one part of it outstanding or remarkable except for the mission design, but that still requires you to use the average gameplay. The game just doesn't connect with me like it has for so many other players. I'm glad that Watch Dogs 2 found an audience, but I don't think this series is for me. Watch Dogs 2 iterates on the multiplayer from the first game and added some new modes. I tried a few of the multiplayer modes, but could only find a handful of games, and of those games I played, none of them held my attention for long. I want to be clear though that I'm not really a multiplayer gamer anyway, so the multiplayer doesn't really factor into my opinion on the game here. As I said before, I don't think Watch Dogs 2 is a terrible game. There's just too much obvious care and passion that went into it to call it that. But here's the breakdown. The presentation is great, the gameplay is fine, and the story is bad. I can completely understand why someone would really like this game, and I also understand why someone would dislike it more than me. At the end of the day, the most important factor of a game to me is how much I enjoyed it. And I didn't particularly enjoy Watch Dogs 2. I didn't hate it, but I never want to play it again. It's just too boring, and the story is just not interesting enough, no matter how pretty the actual game is. I'm going to give Watch Dogs 2 a 6 out of 10. I am not really looking forward to Watch Dogs Legion, to be honest. The first two games haven't really done it for me, and even though the new recruit mechanic seems really cool, I'm just not sure I care at this point. I'll still play it because of the Ubisoft series, but I'm not really anticipating it much. Actually, I want to talk about the Ubisoft series for a sec. I think I'm gonna put it on the back burner. I originally conceived the Ubisoft Retrospective series as a cool idea to get myself to commit to making videos, as I was struggling to be consistent with uploading. And it worked. I've been consistently uploading videos for the last few months. But honestly, I think I bit off more than I could chew. There are a ton of games that I wanted to play for this series, but I want to play a lot of other games as well. Games that have nothing to do with Ubisoft. So I've decided to not make it a priority anymore. I will eventually get around to doing all the games I wanted to, like the Far Cry series and finishing the Assassin's Creed series, but I've always enjoyed playing a wide variety of games, and I just can't play all these Ubisoft games back to back to back. Also, when I first started the Ubisoft series, I was only working 3 days a week, giving me lots of time to work on videos. But since then, I've started a new job that's 5 days a week, which is good because I'm making more money, but I have less time to work on videos. And since I have less time to play games, I'm basically only playing games that I'm making videos on. And I don't want to play only Ubisoft games for the foreseeable future. So that's that. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and leave a comment on what you think of Watch Dogs 2. Thanks for watching.